Cirrus stumbled across the jagged ash plains, every step sending sparks of heat from the volcanic ground into her battered wings. Her breath came in short, ragged bursts and every movement ached. She had been banished from the Sky Citadel for breaking an ancient rule, a rule that governed when dragons could mate, when they could lay their eggs. Now, alone, she was nothing but a shadow in a world that offered no mercy. The sky above burned orange and gray, thick with ash that clung to her scales. Each flap of her wings brought a sharp pain, reminding her that she was weak, broken. She had once soared above the mountains with pride, her roar echoing across Virilia, her scales gleaming in sunlight. Now she was crawling over rocks like a wounded animal, her pride as shattered as her wings. She stopped at the edge of a deep chasm, staring at the blackened valley below. Her claws dug into the earth, leaving scratches that sizzled where the molten rock seeped through cracks. Hunger gnawed at her, but the real torment was loneliness. No dragon dared come near, the Sky Citadel would not forgive her. Even the smaller dragons avoided her, frightened of the shame that clung to her like a shadow. She lowered her head and let out a quiet, trembling roar, a sound that held both anger and sorrow. The wind carried her cry across the barren landscape, but no one answered. Meanwhile, far above the ash plains, a human scout named Eamon Reddick navigated his hovertrike through the shifting smoke clouds. Humans were rare on Virilia, explorers and scouts who came to map dangerous territories for distant colonies. Most stayed close to safe zones, avoiding dragons entirely. But Eamon had learned early in life that danger was part of survival, and intelligence and courage often outweighed brute strength. He had been tracking unusual thermal readings when he saw her. A massive, wounded creature struggling across the lava fields. He slowed the hovertrike and studied her from a distance. Most humans would have turned away. A dragon could kill him in seconds if she wanted. But something in the way she moved, fragile, desperate, almost human in her fear, made him pause. Eamon scanned the heat signatures and saw her breathing shallowly, each inhale a struggle. She was starving. Injured. Alone. Eamon hesitated only a moment. He reached for the nutrient paste he carried for emergencies and filled a small vial. His hands shook slightly, not from fear but from anticipation. This was a test of courage, a moment that could define him. Humans were weak compared to dragons, but humans were clever. Humans could act where others would freeze. He stepped onto a small rise, revealing himself to her. Cirrus froze instantly, her amber eyes narrowing as she hissed, smoke curling from her nostrils. She knew humans, rare, unpredictable, often violent. She had seen their kind before, armed and reckless. Her wings twitched nervously. Every instinct screamed to strike, to flee, to survive. "Easy," Eamon called softly, keeping his voice calm, steady. "I'm not here to hurt you." The words sounded foolish against the roar of the wind and the crackle of the ash beneath her claws. But something in his tone, a quiet determination, made her hesitate. Hunger and pain won over fear. Slowly, cautiously, she lowered her head. Eamon crept closer, holding out the vial. The heat of the ash burned his boots, the tremors of the ground rattled him, but he did not flinch. Step by step, he closed the distance, trusting his instincts and hoping that his careful movements would speak louder than words. Cirrus sniffed the nutrient paste. She recoiled at first, the scent foreign, alien, almost unbearable. Then, driven by hunger, she took a small taste. The flavor was strange, not like anything she had ever eaten in the Citadel, but it gave her strength, a spark in her fading life. She looked at Eamon, eyes wide and wary but not hostile. Eamon smiled faintly, relief washing over him, though he kept his voice low. "You're stronger than you think. We just need to get you somewhere safe." He knew the terrain was brutal, and transporting a dragon, even a small or injured one, was nearly impossible. The ash plains were full of molten fissures and hidden eruptions. Predators and scavengers roamed in packs. He also knew the dragon citadel would never welcome her back. Their rules were too rigid. But humans did not back down from impossible odds. Humans planned. Humans acted. Humans found a way. Cirrus shifted, testing her wings, and a hiss of pain escaped her throat. Eamon flinched but did not move away. He scanned the horizon. There was a faint glimmer, a low-lying valley in the distance. It might be a sanctuary, a place where she could heal. It was far, through unstable terrain, but it was the only hope. As the sun dipped behind a curtain of ash, casting long, sinister shadows across the plains, Eamon made a silent vow. He would not let her die, not on his watch. He would navigate the lava, face the predators, and use every ounce of human cunning to keep her alive. But the plains were alive with danger. A tremor shook the ground beneath them, sharp and sudden, splitting rocks and sending a plume of smoke into the air. Cirrus flinched violently. Eamon gripped his hovertrike, eyes wide, heart pounding. This was only the beginning. And somewhere, beyond the horizon, the first of the threats that would test their courage and intelligence was waiting. Eamon adjusted the straps on his hovertrike, making a makeshift harness to support Cirrus as she limped across the ash plains. Every step she took sent sparks flying from the scorching ground, and her wings twitched nervously. He knew she could collapse at any moment, yet she kept moving, guided by some stubborn instinct to survive. Humans were rare in these lands and dragons rarely trusted them, but he had no choice. If she fell, there would be no one left to save her. He spoke softly, keeping his voice calm over the roar of distant geysers. "You can do this," he said. "I won't let you fall." His words might have sounded foolish to anyone else, but Cirrus seemed to sense the promise. She glanced at him, eyes full of wary curiosity, and took another step forward. The plains were alive with dangers. Smoke curled from fissures in the earth, and molten rivers ran in jagged lines, threatening to cut them off at every turn. Small predators lurked near the edges of the lava flows, waiting for a misstep. Eamon scanned constantly, using a thermal sensor built into his visor. One false move and both of them could be lost in seconds. As they advanced, a sudden movement caught his attention. A small pack of ash foxes, scavenger creatures adapted to the harsh plains, darted toward them, teeth bared. Cirrus hissed and reared back, instinctively ready to strike. Eamon raised a hand and shouted, "Wait!" He grabbed a handful of reflective ash from the ground and flung it toward the predators, creating a blinding flare of light. The foxes skidded and hesitated, their advance stalling. "Good," he whispered. "Stay calm." Cirrus lowered her wings slightly, watching the creatures with tension coiled in her muscles. For the first time she seemed to realize that he could help, that he was more than a strange, fragile human. The next challenge came faster than he expected. A fissure opened suddenly beneath their feet, smoke and sparks rising from the deep chasm. Cirrus froze, her wings trembling. The gap was too wide to jump safely, and the lava below would have burned through scales in seconds. Eamon's mind raced. Humans didn't have the strength to carry dragons, but humans could think, improvise, and act fast. He scanned the terrain and spotted a series of jagged rocks protruding like stepping stones across the fissure. "We can make it," he said, "but you have to trust me." Cirrus's amber eyes narrowed, doubt flashing, but hunger, pain, and hope outweighed fear. Slowly she inched forward. Eamon guided her, calling out directions, timing her steps, adjusting the harness on the fly. Sparks flew as claws scraped against rock. His heart pounded and every muscle tensed. One wrong move and the fissure would claim them both. Step by careful step they crossed, finally landing on solid ground. Cirrus exhaled a smoky sigh, and for a fleeting moment, the bond between them strengthened, a fragile trust born of shared struggle. They pressed on toward a distant valley that glimmered faintly in the haze. It might hold water, shelter, even the rare minerals that could help her wings heal. Eamon didn't know for sure, but hope was all they had. Yet even as they moved, the sound of something larger drew his attention, a low, vibrating roar that echoed across the plains. He turned his head sharply and saw movement in the clouds above. Sky pirates. Humanoid figures in armored gliders circled, scanning the ash plains. Eamon's jaw tightened. These humans were ruthless, hunting dragons for sport, for fame, for profit. Cirrus's eyes widened in fear and instinct took over. Her wings flared, smoke curling from her nostrils. Eamon held up his hands. "Wait, don't attack," he warned. He studied the pirates' flight patterns and saw an opening. He grabbed a small magnetic pulse device from his pack, a prototype meant to disable machines temporarily, and flung it toward the nearest glider. The pulse sent a jolt through its systems, spinning it off course. Another pirate fired, plasma bolts slicing the air, but Eamon ducked, rolling behind a jagged rock. Cirrus hesitated, unsure what to do. She could fight, but the pirates were armed and fast. Then Eamon shouted, "Follow my lead." He ran across the plain, baiting the pirates toward a series of smoke vents. As they pursued, he triggered small flares that reflected in the ash clouds, confusing the pirates' targeting systems. Cirrus watched, startled, then understood. Timing her movements to his signals, she leapt and twisted, dodging bolts, weaving around the humans' improvised distractions. By the time they reached a safer ridge, the pirates had given up the chase, frustrated and blinded by the ingenuity of a single human. Cirrus hovered above the ground, wings trembling, eyes wide. She tilted her head, almost as if she was assessing him. Eamon's chest heaved, sweat mixing with ash, but a grin spread across his face. "You see," he panted. "Humans don't just fight. We think. We survive. We find a way." Cirrus gave a soft hiss, almost approving, before collapsing onto the ridge, exhausted. Eamon knelt beside her, checking her wings. The burns were bad and the joint damage severe, but she had survived. For now. He knew this was only the beginning. The valley ahead might hold what they needed to heal her, but reaching it would be harder than anything they had faced. More predators, unstable terrain, and the ever-present threat of sky pirates lay in wait. He also realized that Cirrus, fragile and battered, would need more than food and protection. She would need trust, patience and courage just like him. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky a dangerous red. Shadows stretched across the ash plains, hiding unknown threats. Eamon stood, scanning the horizon, and whispered, "We keep moving. One step at a time. Together." Cirrus gave a low, smoky growl, and with a trembling flap of her wings, she rose slightly, ready to follow. But as they advanced, a sharp rumble beneath the ground startled them both. Rocks shifted and the air trembled. Something massive was moving toward them, a predator unlike anything they had faced. Eamon's mind raced. There was no time to retreat, no safe path. His courage would be tested in ways he had never imagined. And in that moment, both human and dragon understood the harsh truth of Virelia. Survival demanded more than strength. It demanded intelligence, courage, and an unbreakable will. The rumble grew louder, shaking the ash plains beneath their feet. Cirrus crouched, wings splayed, smoke curling from her nostrils in nervous bursts. Eamon's hovertrike wobbled on the jagged terrain, his hands gripping the controls as he scanned the horizon. Heat waves warped the air, and molten rivers twisted across their path like living snakes. The predator was coming, and it was enormous, far larger than any scavenger or ash fox they had encountered. Eamon's mind raced. His first thought was to flee, but there was no safe path. Lava flows cut off the valleys, and the predator was faster than they could run. Cirrus hissed, ready to strike, but she was still weak. Alone she would not survive. Alone he would not survive. Together they had a chance, but only if he acted quickly. He studied the landscape and saw a pattern in the fissures, a network of jagged rock formations leading to a shallow ravine. The predator's massive size would make it difficult to navigate such narrow paths. That could be their advantage. But even then, timing would be everything. One mistake and they would be trapped. Eamon grabbed a coil of high-tension cable from his pack. It wasn't a weapon, humans didn't always rely on brute force, but a clever tool could be more powerful than strength. He tied one end to the hovertrike, the other to a nearby jagged boulder, creating a makeshift anchor. Cirrus glanced at him, confused, her amber eyes flicking between the lava and the tremor-shaken ground. "Trust me," he said, voice steady despite the pounding of his heart. "This will slow it down." The predator's roar echoed across the plains, and shadows lengthened as it emerged. A massive quadruped with molten cracks across its obsidian-scaled back, glowing eyes fixed on them. Every step it took sent tremors through the ground. Cirrus flinched, claws digging into ash, wings quivering. Eamon shouted, "Now move." He kicked the hovertrike into motion, zigzagging across the terrain. Cirrus followed, flapping clumsily but keeping pace. The predator charged, its jaws snapping, molten sparks flying from the ground with every stomp. Eamon threw down reflective ash flares, blinding it briefly, then lured it toward the anchored cable. The cable caught its leg as it lunged, yanking it sideways. The predator roared, thrashing, but the tension held. It stumbled, slowing its momentum just enough for them to gain distance. Cirrus's heart raced, her instincts screamed to attack, to flee, to survive, but she began to follow Eamon's plan. Humans were fragile, yes, but they were unpredictable, and that unpredictability could save lives. They navigated the labyrinth of lava flows, rocks, and fissures. Every misstep could be fatal, yet Eamon kept calculating, adjusting their path with every move. He shouted instructions, timing Cirrus's leaps, guiding her over molten cracks. Sweat dripped into his eyes, mixing with ash, but he refused to stop. Humans thrived under impossible odds because they refused to freeze. They adapted, they improvised, they survived. As they neared the edge of a lava river, Eamon saw the next obstacle, a series of jagged spires rising like teeth from the molten ground. No dragon could jump far enough, and the predator would reach them in moments. He scanned the hovertrike, then his pack, pulling out small, magnetic pulse grenades, tools humans used for temporarily disabling machines. They were meant for robots, but humans often used ingenuity to bend tools beyond their intended purpose. Eamon threw the grenades along the spires. Sparks flew, and the molten rocks shimmered under the brief pulses of magnetic energy. The predator hesitated, its glowing eyes scanning the shifting terrain. That hesitation was all they needed. "Jump!" Eamon shouted. Cirrus flapped her wings with trembling strength, and together they cleared the jagged spires, landing on the other side. The hovertrike skidded across uneven ground, sparks showering from its exhaust. Eamon's hands burned from gripping the controls, but he held on, steadying the ride as Cirrus clumsily touched down beside him. They didn't have time to rest. The predator roared again, the sound shaking the air like thunder. Its massive body surged forward, molten sparks erupting with every step. Eamon's mind raced. What could a human do against a creature so powerful? His heart pounded. Humans didn't have claws or fire, but humans had intelligence, strategy, and a stubborn refusal to die. That would be enough. He scanned the horizon and saw it, a ridge of jagged cliffs forming a natural funnel. The predator would have to follow them through a narrow passage, giving Cirrus a chance to use her remaining strength. Eamon pointed toward the ridge. "Follow me, stay close, and do exactly as I do." Cirrus hesitated, fear flickering in her amber eyes. But trust had grown between them, fragile but real. She nodded, smoke curling from her nostrils in a low hiss of agreement. Together they began sprinting toward the funnel, navigating rocks, ash, and unstable ground. Behind them the predator thundered, each step faster, closer. Sparks flew from the fissures as it lunged. Eamon's pulse raced. He knew the next few moments would decide everything. Human courage was being tested, not by raw strength, but by the sharpness of his mind, the precision of his choices, and his willingness to risk himself for the dragon. As they approached the cliff's funnel, Eamon noticed a small hidden ledge along the path, a precarious spot that could give them a split-second advantage. He shouted to Cirrus, "Left. Now." Together they veered sharply, forcing the predator to adjust its massive body mid-charge. The creature stumbled, sending molten rocks scattering in every direction. Cirrus's wings twitched in relief as she hovered briefly, recovering. Eamon kept moving, heart racing, sweat and ash covering him. They had survived this round, but the predator was not defeated. The plains of Virelia were full of dangers yet, and reaching the valley ahead would require more courage, more intelligence, and more risk than either of them could yet imagine. The predator roared once more, and the tremor underfoot reminded them both. The real test was just beginning. The valley lay before them like a jewel hidden among the ash plains, glowing faintly from the minerals embedded in its rocky floor. Cirrus hovered cautiously, wings trembling as molten steam hissed from the ground around them. Her body ached and her wings were still weak, but she could sense the promise of life here, a chance to heal, to recover. Eamon wiped sweat from his brow and studied the terrain. The valley was beautiful, but beautiful things often held danger. They were not alone. From the shadows of jagged cliffs, the alpha dragons emerged, their massive forms blocking the valley entrance. Amber eyes glowed in the dim light, scales shimmering like obsidian. Cirrus froze. These were her kin, powerful, judgmental, and unforgiving. The alpha dragons did not forget exile, and they did not forgive easily. She had expected judgment, perhaps attack, but seeing the humans with her complicated everything. Eamon's pulse quickened. One wrong move, one sudden gesture, and the alpha dragons would strike. Humans had no weapons strong enough to fight them directly. But humans had courage and intelligence, and sometimes, that was enough to tilt the odds. He stepped forward slowly, hands raised to show he carried nothing but himself. His voice carried across the valley, calm but firm. "I come in peace," he said. "I am here to help her, not harm her. Trust me." The alpha dragons hissed, smoke curling from their nostrils, and one took a step forward, testing his claim. Cirrus's tail twitched anxiously. She could not attack, her strength was still limited, but her presence, weak as it was, seemed to hold some sway over the situation. Eamon's mind raced. He needed more than words, he needed action that could prove trust. He scanned the valley and noticed the mineral pools that glimmered with regenerative energy. Cirrus instinctively knew what they were. Healing had begun, but it required exposure, patience, and protection. Eamon realized the alpha dragons would not allow her to enter the pools unless he demonstrated something extraordinary, moral courage. He had to show them he was not a threat. Eamon took a deep breath, stepped into the open, and raised his body to full height. The ground beneath him was unstable, littered with jagged rocks, yet he stood firm. The alpha dragons hissed, circling, ready to strike, but he did not flinch. He spread his arms wide, empty hands open, a silent message. He would not fight them, he would not flee, he would not harm. He exposed himself fully to danger, a single human standing vulnerable against dragons far stronger than he could ever be. Cirrus watched, awe flickering in her amber eyes. The human before her, frail and unarmed, was risking everything for her life. She understood now. This was courage unlike any she had seen, courage that did not rely on claws, fire, or wings, but on the unwavering choice to protect another being. The alpha dragons hesitated, observing this act. Aemon kept his gaze steady, every muscle tense, aware that the slightest twitch could provoke them. Cirrus slowly began to step toward the pools, guided by his calm voice. She dipped a wounded wing into the shimmering water, and a ripple of light spread across her scales. Burns faded, torn membranes began to knit, and strength returned to muscles that had felt useless for weeks. One alpha dragon took a step closer, eyeing the human. It had expected weakness, exploitation, fear, but instead it saw something different. Intelligence, patience, courage. Humans could be clever, unpredictable, and sometimes heroes. Cirrus's healing accelerated as the alpha dragons watched silently, no longer attacking, no longer threatening. Aemon took another step forward, careful to avoid shadows that might hide a strike. "She is stronger now," he said. "And I will leave this valley peacefully once she is safe. That is my promise." His voice carried conviction, and for the first time, the alpha dragon seemed to sense the sincerity behind his words. Cirrus flapped her wings experimentally, then fully stretched them, muscles humming with restored energy. She lifted slightly off the ground, circling Aemon as if to shield him. Together, human and dragon moved through the mineral pools, the valley glowing brighter with each passing moment. The alpha dragons watched, then stepped aside, allowing Cirrus full access. The moment was tense, fragile, yet electric with possibility. Aemon's heart pounded, sweat and ash mixing on his face. He had faced death dozens of times in exploration, but never like this. Never against beings who could obliterate him with a single strike. Yet he had acted, and courage had prevailed. The impossible odds had been met with careful thought, daring improvisation, and an unwavering moral compass. Cirrus rose fully above the mineral pools, wings strong, scales gleaming. She let out a low, reverberating roar, not of fear but of triumph. Aemon watched, knowing that this moment would change both their lives forever. His courage had saved a life, but more than that, it had proven that humans were not weak. Humans could inspire, protect, and even reshape the destiny of dragons. The sky over the valley darkened slightly as ash clouds shifted, but neither human nor dragon flinched. They had endured fire, predators, exile, and judgment, yet here they were, alive, stronger, bonded. Cirrus circled Aemon once more, then landed, smoke curling gently from her nostrils, eyes soft and trusting. The valley was calm now, glowing with mineral light. Aemon looked around, exhausted yet proud. The alpha dragons, once poised to attack, now watched silently, acknowledgement in their gaze. He had risked his life and succeeded, not through weapons or brute force, but through intelligence, courage, and moral clarity. But he knew this was not the end. The ash plains would still hold dangers, the sky pirates had not gone far, and Cirrus's full recovery was only the beginning. The future demanded more courage, more ingenuity, more human determination. And yet, for this moment, one human had changed the course of a dragon's life, had proven that courage, intelligence, and heart could triumph where strength alone could not. From the ridge above, distant echoes of rumbling ash warned them that challenges were not over. But Aemon smiled faintly, knowing that humans could always find a way. The valley was quiet now, the mineral pools glowing softly under the ash-streaked sky. Cirrus hovered low, her wings stretching fully, every movement smooth and confident. Burns had healed, joints mended, and the tension of exile was finally easing from her body. She glanced at Aemon, amber eyes filled with something more than gratitude, trust, respect, and a fragile bond forged through fire, fear, and shared survival. Aemon sank to one knee, exhausted but alert. His boots were scorched, his clothes smeared with ash and sweat, yet he smiled. The human body was weak compared to dragon strength, but it had one advantage: intelligence, courage, and an unshakable will to protect others. He had risked everything and it had worked. Cirrus nudged his shoulder gently with her snout, smoke curling from her nostrils. It was a small gesture, but one that carried enormous meaning. In dragon society, physical touch was rare and sacred, and she had chosen to offer it to a human. Aemon exhaled, letting relief wash over him. "This valley, it's safe," he said quietly. "You can heal fully here. No one can harm you." Cirrus tilted her head, listening, then slowly settled beside him. Her tail swept across the ash, stirring faint sparks, a small display of regained power. The alpha dragons that had watched them earlier now approached, circling the valley's edge. Cirrus lifted her wings in acknowledgement, then glanced back at Aemon. The humans' courage had earned their respect. The exiled dragon was no longer alone, and the humans had proved their worth, not through weapons but through intellect, strategy, and unwavering bravery. One of the alpha dragons stepped closer to Aemon, amber eyes assessing him. Aemon stood tall, hands open, showing no fear. The dragon sniffed, smoke drifting from its nostrils, then gave a low, approving hiss. In that moment, Aemon understood. He had not only saved Cirrus, but he had bridged two worlds. Humans were fragile, yes, but capable of courage and wisdom that could earn respect even from dragons. Cirrus dipped one claw into the glowing mineral pool. The water shimmered and reflected her restored strength. She flapped her wings lightly, testing her limits, then rose fully, circling above the valley in a display of renewed power. Her roar echoed across the plains, not of fear but of triumph. Aemon's heart swelled. This was victory, not just for her but for all humans who had ever been underestimated, dismissed, or thought weak. Courage, he realized, was the greatest strength of all. Days passed in the valley. Aemon stayed close, tending to Cirrus and exploring the pool's properties. Each day her strength grew, her scales shining brighter, her wings stronger. The alpha dragons monitored silently, never approaching too closely but never leaving either. Their presence was a constant reminder that the world was still dangerous, but also that respect and trust could emerge even in the harshest circumstances. Cirrus began to venture further each day, testing flight, practicing maneuvers she had not attempted in weeks. Aemon watched, sometimes from a safe ridge, sometimes hovering beside her on the modified hovertrike. They communicated silently, understanding each other's intentions without words. A human and a dragon, working together, relying on courage, intelligence, and trust. One evening, as the sun dipped beneath the horizon, painting the ash clouds in fiery reds and purples, Aemon realized that their bond had changed something fundamental. Dragons would survive this harsh world because of strength and instinct, but humans could endure through cleverness, through courage, and through heart. Cirrus had been broken and exiled, yet a human had restored her hope. Cirrus hovered low, nudging Aemon's shoulder once more. She lowered her head to the mineral pool, drinking deeply, then flapped her wings and lifted him slightly into the air. For a moment, human and dragon were airborne together, a symbol of a partnership that defied odds, species, and expectations. The alpha dragons, observing from the cliffs, seemed to accept this new reality. They would not interfere. Aemon's courage had reshaped the rules of the valley, proving that strength was not always physical, and survival was not always about power. Intelligence, daring, and heart could tip the scales. When the first of the sky pirates appeared on the horizon again, drawn by rumors of dragons, Aemon was ready. He and Cirrus had learned the terrain, the timing, and how to use ingenuity against overwhelming odds. The humans had survived impossible situations before, but now they had a dragon ally, a partner in courage ready to face threats together. Cirrus let out a soft roar, a low vibration that shook the air, signaling Aemon to prepare. Humans might be fragile, but they were fearless when they had something worth protecting. Aemon grinned, adjusting the hovertrike and strapping himself in. Together they would face whatever came next, predators, pirates, or the harshest ash storms Virelia could throw at them. For the first time, Cirrus truly trusted a human, and he understood that trust was earned not with fear or force, but with unwavering courage and determination. He had survived not through weapons but through heart. He had saved a life, altered a destiny, and shown that humans could shine even in worlds dominated by strength far greater than their own. As the night fell, the valley glowed softly, minerals shimmering under the ash clouds. Aemon stood beside Cirrus, looking out over the plains. He knew this was only the beginning of their journey, but the lesson was clear. Humans could face impossible odds, survive, and even inspire change in the most unforgiving worlds. And in that valley, a dragon who had lost all hope found new life, and a human proved that courage, intelligence, and determination could triumph where raw strength alone might fail. Together they soared toward the horizon, leaving behind a valley of ash and despair, carrying the spark of hope that would forever mark Virelia, and the legend of a human who refused to give up.